Hi, I'm Tyra G, your host of Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. Welcome again to our virtual global gathering of phenomenal people. Yes, you, fearsome and generous, humble and honest, in pursuit of new possibilities and purpose. Every week, we meet for 1 hour to experience, educate, encourage, and empower each other through our joy, our aha moments, and stories that have been left in our pockets for too long. You know, we're going to share some topics that tradition tells us there are some things that we just don't talk about. But here we live beyond the wreckage. Each week we'll start right where we are. You're listening to Radio Fairfax, Virginia, on your TV, computer, or mobile device. And we are webcast worldwide on the internet at www.radiofairfax.org every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Yeah, I know, it's date night, but no worries. You can catch us on our podcast on YouTube. Just key in Frankly Speaking with Tyra G. And yeah, I know some of you like to write to me offline, and you know I love it. It's easy. Just email me at tyragarlington.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Courtney Nero, for composing and performing our Frankly Speaking theme song and for naming it I'm Listening. Our theme this month is Thank You for Your Service Then and Now. I am passionately celebrating veterans and active duty military who continually help us sustain and maintain our quality of life, often at the greatest of cost. We're also highlighting their current lives and contributions. I think that you, like me, will learn something new about something old. This November and December, you will hear stories through a diverse lens to include the wars fought, age, gender, race, family impact, and cultural and social legacies. So far, we've heard stories from Mary Jessie Herrera, a 100-pound, 20-year-old military policewoman who wore as accessories an M16 and a 9mm sidearm in Iraq. After being wounded in an ambush while taking prisoners to Fallujah and 20 operations putting her arm back together, she's raising 2 wonderful daughters and has a master's degree. We heard a story from George Bodie, an African-American officer in the Vietnam War who had to manage the implications of the first fully integrated United States military, who also saw the highest proportion of blacks ever to serve in an American war. We heard heart-to-heart stories from women about their decisions and consequences thereof to serve in Vietnam as nurses, librarians, and social support personnel. We also heard sad stories from wives of POW and military widows. Considering this is the 100th year anniversary of World War I, you know I always like to create a common thought space for our time together. I'm going to do that every week by choosing a story of a World War I military person. So each week we're going to step back into once upon a time, 100 years ago. The first story is the following, and I quote, World War I is among the least documented wars of those covered by the Veterans History Project, and the number of collections relating its experiences are not likely to grow dramatically. Every veteran has his or her own war, and each is custodian of a unique story and memories. Because all but a handful of World War I vets are no longer alive, oral history interviews are out of the question. So we must rely on the generosity of relatives and friends. This is a story about Thomas J. Quayle, entitled Sarah Webster, Widow of World War I. submitted by Tish Wells, a distant cousin. This shows us that some stories aren't so much about the stories of the soldier, but who they leave behind. Thomas J. Quayle was born in 1886. He served in World War I with the United States Army. The enlistment was in 1917, and the service was completed in 1918. 3 months before, on April 6, the U.S. had declared war on Germany. Lieutenant Thomas Quayle, 31, married 23-year-old Sarah Webster in July 1917, and they moved from base to base as the U.S. went to war. Then he was sent to fight in Europe. In January of 1918, Sarah Webster Quayle was blissfully married, living in Montgomery, Alabama. Now her husband was senior first lieutenant and very, very busy. Sarah had made some friends, but was still very lonely. At one point, she joined her husband in Petersburg, Virginia in May, and still unhappy, but more so because she caught malaria. Worse than that, Quayle was shipped out on June 15th from Hoboken, New Jersey on the USS Leviathan, once a German-owned liner. Sarah wrote to a friend of hers. She says, "I am so proud to give, but it's so hard, for it means separation during the best years of our lives. I sometimes tremble for him, for I so want him to come back to me well and whole. I long for a home, a dear cozy one, where just the two of us can live and learn to know one another better." But the war was omnipresent in her thoughts. Then she received the sweetest letter, dressed in the worst of news, from Tom. He wrote, "We're packing up to leave finally for the firing line." Then reality bit hard. Quayle was killed in action on the 29th during the Meuse-Argonne Drive, according to the U.S. military records. He was buried in a military seminar in France. The death notice was sent to his wife in her home in Oberlin, Ohio. It took a month to arrive. Thomas Quayle's death came just over 6 weeks before the armistice to end the war was signed in November 11. His remains were repatriated from France to Oberlin, Ohio. He was buried in Westwood Cemetery in 1921. In the end, around 4 million soldiers were mobilized, and 116,708 American military personnel died during World War I from all causes, to include influenza, combat, and wounds. Over 204,000 were wounded, and 757 U.S. civilians died due to military action. After a break, we're going to meet a contemporary soldier, a lieutenant colonel retired in 2009 from the U.S. Army. However, his service has never stopped. That is why I titled today's segment "From Career Soldier to Champion of the People." So you grab a snack, get comfortable, and stay close. And we are back. Welcome, Lieutenant Colonel retired Warren Christopher. And a lot more goes with that title, but I'll let him tell you. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I really am very grateful for the opportunity just to come and share, and hopefully something said or done tonight will have an impact on a life. And I am so grateful for all of the warriors that had the privilege to don the uniform of America's greatest warriors.
Absolutely.
Those giants that allowed me to stand on their shoulders.
I heard that. And I think what we tend to do each day is to deal with the things that are right in front of us. And the reason I'm so excited about these 2 months celebrating those who have given and given and given is I want to bring to people's sight, within their sight, the idea that there are other people taking care of us at all times. Now, you know that I ask everyone that comes on to introduce themselves because you know what you want people to know. Not so much a resume, but what makes you tick? Who are you really? So, without further ado, why don't you do that?
Well, I am Warren Christopher. Most importantly to me is my spirituality and that life and that gift of love that God has shared with me. The greatest gift that God has granted me is the opportunity to be a dad. I love that with all of my being. I've been so blessed to have two daughters, Brittany and Ashley, whom I adore. One is a small business owner, and the other one recently graduated from Hampton University and now is attending medical school to become a physical therapist. I am so thankful to God for my lifetime of service, having served 25 years in the military, commanding our troops, American sons and daughters, on foreign land in combat all around the globe. I am so grateful for the opportunity to have served during President Obama's administration as a chief of staff at the Department of the Interior, as a senior executive. And then lastly, my life has been committed to being a servant leader. I sought the nomination for Congress in Maryland's 4th Congressional District a few years ago. I didn't succeed in winning the nomination, but I won. I won because this little boy from Alabama that, experienced tremendous adversity and challenges was able to uh, launch a viable campaign to fulfill a dream just to be a candidate for the U.S. Congress. And so I've learned that, it's not that you didn't succeed. What was important for me is to take all the lessons that caused me to win, even until this day. So that's just a little bit about me. And the last thing that I would say is that I am so honored to have been awarded Big Brother of the Year by Big Brother and Big Sisters of America here in the National Capital Region. And that is one of the greatest passions that I have today is serving as a mentor to our young boys of color from, communities that are challenged. And so I know that that is a calling from God that's been ordained by God for me, and I embrace it with all of my being.
It sounds to me like your life is full.
It is full of purpose, and I am
Yeah.
so excited that God chose me to be a witness, that He chose me to be a model,
Hmm.
to advance an idea about what goodness is, about mercy and compassion and love and peace and joy. I'm
Hmm.
so glad that He chose me to be an example or be a representative of love, to be a representative of peace, to be a representative of joy. You know, Tyra, I am often reminded that imagine if your boss says to you, I want you to go to the World Council and I want you to represent this organization at the World Council.
Hmm.
Imagine how excited, how exuberant one might feel for having such a privilege because their boss wanted that person to be the representative
Hmm.
for the organization. Well, guess what? I am elated. I am overjoyed that God has picked me to be a representative of the throne for peace and love and compassion and joy.
Now, I'm going to stay right there and ask you, being this vessel for the Lord, how did that get translated when you were in theater? Tell our audience where you were.
Absolutely. One of the things that I am so grateful for today is that I took troops into combat on 6 different occasions, and every time I brought all troops home alive.
Excellent.
And let me tell you what the foundation for that was.
Tell us where you were first.
I was in Afghanistan. I was
Uh-huh.
in Iraq.
Uh-huh.
I served in Bosnia, in Kosovo, and also in operations in Macedonia
Hmm.
and in the Philippines.
Okay.
And so I led every effort with prayer and with asking God to have mercy on my troops, to protect and give their families peace back at home. And so I've never been ashamed or embarrassed to leverage my spirituality
Wherever you were.
wherever I was during times when I thought it was most needed.
Hmm.
And for me, that was to cover my troops with grace and mercy and protection
Hmm.
so that they could be returned to their families safely
Hmm.
and without harm.
Well, let us reflect then. I was in your troops. I was in one of your troops, and we go into battle and we come back out safely. What lesson will I have learned with you as my leader?
You would have learned that I am unashamed to leverage the spirituality of God, that I don't mind as a man, as a commander, as a soldier to be vulnerable, to kneel with you and pray together, that God strengthen us and that it gives us and equips us with everything that we need to be vigilant, to be bold, and to go forth and do what our country has called us to do. And God honored that every time.
I was going to ask as well. Um, you are leading probably younger men for the most part. How did they receive this? I'm sure that they were walking in fear at times.
Of course, but because of my confidence, because
Okay.
of my vulnerability, and sometimes men are afraid to be vulnerable,
Yes, they are.
but because of my vulnerability, because of my humility, and it wasn't about a rank at that time, it was about one troop, one comrade to another, that we at that moment, at that time, was responsible for each other. And so, sure, while I had the brass adorned and the legal authority to command, it was about camaraderie. It was about brotherhood and sisterhood. It was about having each other's back. It was also though about prayer and being comfortable with kneeling and holding hands and praying together and asking God to have mercy on our souls and to watch out for us and our fellow man and woman and to protect and keep our families uh, back home while we were out doing the work that our country had called us to do.
So, my next question is obviously, I suspect other people besides me would be asking, you didn't have, this is an assumption, you didn't have 100% Christians that you led into these places.
Absolutely, that's true. And for me, that wasn't necessarily important. What was important is that whatever your faith was, that we came together and we uh, collectively leverage spirituality for the for a common good. Sometimes, Tyra, in my opinion, we get wrapped up so much in religion.
Mm-hmm.
I respect all people's religion, but
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's about a spirituality. And
Okay.
so maybe I didn't have a Christian, maybe I had a Muslim, or maybe I had a Jew. It didn't matter at that time. What mattered was that we leverage our faith to be able to move forward and to be able to go and do the work that we'd been called to do, to put boots on the ground, to go out and defend the very uh, democracy, to defend the very freedom that we enjoy right here at home, and through that, perhaps share it with someone else that have never known it. And so it wasn't about a religion. It was about leveraging our spirituality. And you'll hear me talk about that time and time again. It's about my spirituality. It's about the boldness that God has granted me. It's about the strength that He's given me to be able to reach all people, regardless of their religion.
And that's for me. That's important for us to emphasize. I'm hearing you say now it's a universality of faith,
Absolutely.
and that we are not labeling the faith, although you are strengthened by your Christian faith. That allows you to love anybody, everybody, everywhere.
Absolutely, because when you're out on the battlefield at that time and place, and when you're engaging or you're staring uh, at the enemy, honestly, it's about a universality, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's about respecting one man and woman to another. It's not about rank. It's not about religion. It's not even about status or what you drive or where you live. It's about we are in this together. We're going forward together, and we're coming home together. And I believe for many of us, we were able to attain coming home through our faith, whatever that faith was.
Okay.
We put everything to the side and we leveraged a universal spirituality to be able to gain strength to go and do what we've been called to do.
So let's take a divine imagination to the story and say we're in Bosnia.
Sure.
Take us through a day, you and your troops. What's it like for you?
Wow. The early days of Bosnia, and I was there in 1997.
Okay.
That was when there was no infrastructure there. It was cold. It was wet. When I say no infrastructure, there are no buildings. So the mud, one would be up to their knees in mud. I mean, you had to eat what we call the meal ready to eat, the
Yeah.
MREs.
Uh-huh.
There was not very many warm meals. There were no showers. And so you had to really dig deep within to be able to carry on just to the next day. And then, oh, by the way, we were there fighting for something that we really didn't understand what we were fighting for.
Talk
But
about
what
that
we
more.
were standing
Yeah.
on guard. Although the senior officers, we knew that we were staring in the face of tyranny, that we was preventing tyranny from encroaching upon our shores or up on the shores of our allies.
Uh-huh.
But really, when it came down to the very tactical day-to-day operations, it was beyond comprehension
Mm-hmm.
because we expected our troops to be great. We expected them to live by the rules of war
Uh-huh.
or the rules of engagement.
Okay.
We expected them to be soldiers, to be statesmen and stateswomen.
Mm-hmm.
We expected so much of them.
Was it too much?
We expected, in my opinion, we expected too much because in reality, particularly when you look on the flip side of it, we gave too little because they came home with traumatic brain injury. They came home with post-traumatic stress disorder. They came home maimed, broken-hearted, broken relationships. They came home different. They came home one day expected to be a killing soldier, but coming home and expecting to flip a switch to say now you're supposed to be a statesman.
Yes, and that transition is something that I focus on a lot. And you and I talked about it. My father was a disabled veteran, and I never heard him say the word war. I never heard him talk about it. It was when I saw the scar all the way across his back that I was constantly aware that something had happened.
Absolutely.
Something had happened.
You know, Tyra, the thing is, that is really, that is, it's really consequential that you're able to actually physically see a scar
Yeah.
on your dad's back. The reality today, then you can't see with the naked eye. You can't see the scars.
I actually, and I'm so glad you said that, I was doing some volunteer work at Walter Reed in Maryland with Wounded Warriors, and they had an occupational therapy setting where they were learning how to reintegrate.
Absolutely.
And one of the psychiatrists was talking, she says, Tyra, we can paste them back together physically, but we cannot fix the transformation that has occurred while they were away.
Well, I will just share with you, and this is very personal for me, and I'll share more about this later. But given some early childhood trauma, and then being in the Pentagon on 9/11, and then being in combat 6 different times. You know, officers, we were taught that you don't have issues, you don't have problems. You need to go out and take care of the problems of your troops. And I really believe that, even to this day, I believe that we must take care of the problems of our troops. But I don't believe that we don't have problems. The reason that I am able to sit here with you today is because I gained the courage to go get help. I
Okay.
sat down with the mental health specialist and I got help, and it saved my life.
I hear you. I hear you.
It literally saved my life. And there was a time that I was embarrassed to talk about it. I was embarrassed as a man. I was embarrassed as an African American man because in the community that I come from, in the African American community, you have a pastor, you have a preacher. That preacher tells you everything that you need is in God. And while I believe that, just like God ordained that preacher, though, he also ordained doctors and lawyers and nurses, psychiatrists and psychologists. And I'm so glad that God gave me the wisdom to get encouraged to go get help. And I did. And I can sit here today a better father, a better friend, a better person to myself because of the decision that I made to be vulnerable, to get help.
Now, what I saw and what you just described, and the whole thing, the word expectations keeps going around in my head. What's expected of the soldier? What's expected of a man? What's expected of a civilian? What's expected of the 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 repositioning from soldier to civilian,
Sure.
and the toll it takes, and the courage it takes to reach out. But from what I can tell, then reading and research, you're in the minority.
Absolutely. I really am.
I mean, in
And
asking for help.
And so that's why it's important for people like me, for soldiers like me, for men like me to share their stories. Not just within the military, but across our world, across our country. People are hurting. People are
Yes,
broken. And when
yes,
you really get to the root cause of the issues, those issues deserve to be addressed. But it takes courage. And sometimes we talk about it, but for men, you need more than talk. They got to feel safe. They got
yes.
to, and then once they feel safe, then they will be vulnerable. And once they're vulnerable, then they can be open to beginning the conversation. But it's not, that's something that's going to happen overnight. For
It's a
me,
process. It's
this
not
has
an event.
taken many, many years.
Yes,
It is.
yes.
It is a process. It's not an event.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad, again, I'm so glad that God chose me to be in a space where I could have the courage and the wisdom and to be vulnerable, uh, to share. It took self awareness, though, for me to be able to do that. Because a lot of us pretend. So many people walk around with masks on. So many people walk around pretending. So I had to ask myself one day, what do you pretend? What are
Mm.
you pretending?
Mm.
Which led me to the space of getting help. And
Mm-hmm.
it changed my life. So, to all of those mental health specialists, to all of those mental health professionals out there, I am so grateful for them because of the services and the compassion that they provided me. I am in love with myself, which I
Mm.
wasn't always.
Yes.
I can have an impact and impart words of encouragement
Mm-hmm.
upon somebody else, and I can be the best person, I can be the best me to serve others.
And like you're talking about the award, the Big Brother of the Year. not only are you the best version of you as a result of your courage to say, hey, I'm broken, help me.
Absolutely.
Okay? You are an example, a role model of generations to come. We just need to find a way to clone you so that there are lots of you, because there are a lot of young people hurting right now.
You-
And they don't know how to ask. So many of our examples are, quote, strong men. And there's something I don't want to walk away from, because you said on, I've counted 3 occasions, you said the men and women in my command. What was that like? What were the women like that you commanded or uh, interfaced with as
Oh,
you?
I commanded a number of women, and they were strong. They were courageous. I honored them, and my sense of honoring women come from being a single father of my 2 daughters.
Okay, okay.
And I was taught by a very strong woman. I have so many strong women influencers in my life. My grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
pastors, um, my godmother, one of the first African American generals in the U.S. Army to command combat troops as the chief of the Army Nurse Corps, General Clara Adams Ender. I love those women. And so when I became a commander of troops to include women, I honored that. Number one, I recognized that America had sent not just their sons, but their daughters off
Yes.
to my charge and to my care. And
Yes.
I had an obligation, a commitment, and a responsibility to make sure that I did everything to make sure that they was trained, equipped, and ready to do what um, uh, they'd sign up to do
Mm-hmm.
and to answer the call of our country. And I did that with compassion. I
Mm-hmm.
did that with dignity and respect and honor, and made sure that they were shielded from, um, unwanted advances of harassment.
Mm-hmm.
And I am just so grateful for all of those, both junior and senior, unto me that impacted my lives through their example. I honor them. I honor them for their service. And that's why I am a proponent of women being able to do whatever job they sign up to do,
And are able to
rather
do.
and are able to do, whether that is
Yes.
in combat, whether that is regardless of where it is.
Mm-hmm.
Let not a policy that has been majority crafted by men to decide what women should do in their careers.
It's difficult. I'm thinking. I'm thinking here, trying to be careful with what I say, but I think sometimes it's difficult when one gender is making policy without the input of the other, because there is a gap in understanding. We are different. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
We are different. We're made different. We go through things differently. But the thing that I am a proponent of is that we respect those differences. We're
Absolutely.
not punished for them. We embrace them and learn how to merge them to make them strong. Strong.
When I think about diversity, I don't think about black or blue, green, brown, yellow, white. I think about leveraging the diversity of everybody at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Rather it be a woman, a Asian, a black person, a person with disabilities, a senior citizen,
Mm-hmm.
a veteran, a civilian. Everybody has something to bring to the table. So let's treat everybody with the dignity and respect that they deserve, regardless of their gender. If it's a woman, respect her and honor her for her contributions. If it's a man, same thing. If it's a senior citizen or older American or younger American, whoever it is, let's leverage the diversity of everybody at the table so we can be a stronger, better community,
Mm-hmm.
state,
Mm-hmm.
nation, world.
And I'm thinking, and I hear this so often, we have got to think in terms of communities and cities. We have got, even though it's one relationship at a time, we've got to look at a goal of being a game changer in our communities. And to me, that's not always a bunch of words. that is a style of living. And when when you are authentically stepping in this world with values that make sense, with morality that makes sense, people see that.
You know, it's so ironic that you said that because as I was sitting here listening, and then I thought, for me to effectively mentor young boys,
Mm-hmm.
when I meet those young boys, they don't know me from anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? There's no trust there.
That's right.
There's nothing. And so their anger, their challenges, their burdens manifest in so many different ways.
Yes, yes.
And it is not until I build trust with them will they even listen. So I get it. So when you talk about community, let's not be quick to judge.
That's it.
Let's seek to understand first. Let's look and ask the question why and what it is that I can do to understand and then make a contribution. So when I mentor those boys, I have to spend a lot of time building trust.
Absolutely. And the thing that the word you only use once, but I was thinking about the whole time you were talking about the mental health assistance you received was there was a lack of judgment.
Absolutely.
And that's what, and meeting children, you and I had talked earlier when I mentor young women, sometimes all I do is show up
Absolutely.
and listen
Absolutely.
and begin to understand where they are and meet them in that space.
Absolutely.
So for me, it is exposing my presence, but not imposing who I am.
Wow.
So I'm hearing you, and I want to actually transcend to the fact that you've taken the leadership skills that you refined in service and you have translated them. And I think there was, I don't want to misquote you, it was, well, I'll put it in my words, there's so much to be done.
There's so much to be done. And I was thinking here, young people, really anyone, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
so your degrees and where you live and what you drive and what you wear,
Mm-hmm.
that's really not important to someone that really needs you to listen or that may need a hug or a smile. That's not really important to them at all. And so to be able to show them,
Yes.
that you care is what's most important. And that's what I've, put at the forefront of my service is to understand, seek to understand before I open my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Seek to understand before I pass one judgment. Ask questions. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
For a reason. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I was thinking about, you as a big brother. Now, first of all, how do they select your little brothers? How does that happen?
Yeah, so that is a very, intense process. First, the big brother has to be vetted.
Yes,
And
I
they
knew
do a
that.
very thorough vetting process.
Good.
And then just through characteristics that I've identified,
Mm-hmm.
and then characteristics that the little has identified, you go on a meeting. And I met my little, and I can call his name the most amazing child, one of the most amazing children I've ever met or had the great pleasure to encounter. His name is Mason. I met Mason when Mason was in 3rd grade.
Uh-huh.
And it's so wonderful. I sit here smiling ear to ear because Mason is now in 11th grade.
Oh.
And when I met Mason, his grades were really poor. He was very withdrawn. His mother had recently had a stroke and was involved in a very serious car accident. So little 3rd grade Mason was taking on the responsibilities of his whole family. He had to speak for his mother because his mother couldn't speak.
Oh.
He had a younger sister. Mason had a lot of burdens. He had a lot of weight on his shoulders he was carrying. But I met Mason, and again, the process of building trust, spending time with him, showing him that I care, not telling him that I care, showing up to his basketball and football games, showing up to events that he was interested in, inviting him out to events,
Yeah.
spending a tremendous amount of time with him. He is one of the most amazing young men that I know. I'm so excited because next spring I am going to get to take Mason on a number of college visits
Oh, that's
for him to be able to
wonderful.
select the college that he's going to attend.
That's wonderful. Now, okay, so Mason's in the 11th grade. What is your favorite time, you and Mason, what you do together now?
So one of our most favorite activities is going go-kart riding.
Oh, my
And
goodness.
Mason still loves going go-kart riding. And we found a number of places in Maryland and Virginia
Uh-huh.
to do that activity. But Mason also loves to eat, and so I enjoy taking him to some of his favorite restaurants.
Uh-huh.
But I also, through my own example,
Uh-huh.
model conduct and performance. So he's seen I've chosen for health reasons, for my personal, not because of doctor prescription, but because of my own um, um, because of my own responsibilities or my own ideas. I stopped eating chicken, beef, and pork. And so Mason has seen that, and so he eats more vegetables, or he'll say, "Well, you pick what we're going to eat," and I know it's not going to be meat, so I'm still going to try it. And so I just really appreciate him because he's just a wonderful person. And again, I thank God for, in the face of being a single dad of two daughters that I love and adore, I'm so grateful that they understand and has completely embraced Mason,
Oh, that's
um,
special.
kind of as a little brother to them.
Yes.
And he calls me old man, and I respond affectionately
Uh-huh.
to yes, son. And so, and his whole family, his mom and his youngest sister, I've just been so blessed to have been in their presence and been able to give back a small portion of the many blessings that God has shared with me.
How's his mom doing?
His mom is so much better
Oh,
today,
good.
able to speak more
Uh-huh.
now, more mobile than she was some years ago. And she's just so grateful. She calls me the family's angel, but it's not
Oh,
me. It is
well, you're a vessel. It is
that
you.
vessel that God has
It's you.
chosen because of my willingness to say yes.
But see, it's your willingness, so it is you.
Amen.
Okay, receive that.
Amen. I receive
Okay,
it.
all right. All right, so now we've talked about what it was like over there. We've talked about diversity and respect. We've talked about expectations. Sometimes they are barriers to growth. We talked about authenticity and vulnerability. Oh my gosh, we've done a lot of talking, haven't we?
Yes.
And so I'd like to talk about, just for a few minutes, um, your political. How did you walk into that space? Was it always there, or what?
At 9 years old,
Oh,
because of my early childhood challenges and blessings, perhaps, um, I used to pray to God and say, God, I would like to be a dad. I want to be a soldier, and I want to be the president of the United States. I
you
prayed.
go, guy.
I prayed that prayer, not knowing, having any idea about what the president of the United States, what that job was all about.
Uh huh.
But I found myself praying that prayer, and so I don't know if I still want to be the president of the United States. But this is what I do still very much desire to do, is to be to continue my lifetime of public service, dedicated to meeting people where they are and being in a seat of influence to help them get to where they want to go. And I'm really most interested in doing that in communities that haven't known a lot of joy and peace, that haven't known a lot of success, communities um, that have been challenged with disparities, communities that have been underserved, whether it be senior citizens, whether it be our veterans, whether it be women, or
Mm-hmm.
whether it be people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that my time is coming for me to serve as an elected official. I just have a desire to, with term limit, I got to add, I have a desire to serve our people authentically and with humility and with grace and compassion, and really to be in a space to do the work that they have sent me to do and the work that God has called me to do.
I was pleased when I was researching you that you highlighted equal pay and equal access to health care for women, being a woman and having experienced the disparity in both of those things for a tradition for a while. Uh, I am encouraged and backing anybody that walks the talk in those two areas.
Well, that is so important, especially for women. Again, number one, oftentimes we find men sitting around the table making decisions about women with no representation of women at the table.
Really?
I think that that is unconscionable.
It is.
But number two is when you think about things like pre-existing conditions, just because a woman give birth, that is considered a pre-existing conditions in some realms of healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how dare someone deny health care to someone that has given birth? Someone gave birth to the President of the United States. Someone gave birth to scientists and mental health professionals and you and me.
I have a theory. That when we make exclusionary and what I'll call uninformed decisions, it's because it's ignorance. And I think it's ignorance plus fear because most people don't understand the outcome of equality in those areas, what that could mean. Oh my gosh, that woman is going to sit sea level in the boardroom and make as much as me. Oh gosh, what will happen?
Absolutely. It is people holding on to power.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you see in our country and in our world today. People are afraid that the last is going to be first. And the
Yes.
first may not necessarily always be in power. And to lose the taste and the grip of power, that is very, very fearful.
And
for some.
I think too, we are defining power as if you have it, it's more than, and if you don't, it's less than.
Yes.
And people forget the power of influence.
Absolutely.
The people forget there are many versions of power. And we're seeing this right now.
Absolutely.
We're seeing evidence. And I think we as a community, as a country, are going to respond because there's several things that we can't really control. We can't control our climate.
Right.
We can't control natural disasters. It's costing us so much more annually to respond to. So maybe we need to take a look at preventative things
Absolutely.
rather than responding to an event. So I don't want to go there. I don't want to be philosophizing on your dime, but there is an assignment I give each one of my guests, and that is to write a letter to your younger self. And what has happened to us thus far on the show sounds like more. Sounds like maybe we'll do this again.
Absolutely.
But for now, I want you to read for our guest what you have written.
Sure. In the beginning, there was light and darkness. Life threw you a lemon, and you found honeysuckles and made lemonade. You showed amazing strength and willpower in commanding the light to shine brighter during a time of great void. God did a great work in you. You were so strong, even in the face of what seemed to be insurmountable challenges. Because of your strength, character, and spirituality, we survived. Before long, we were thriving, and now, all because of the foundation you laid for us. With the mercy and grace of God, We are soaring. We find great joy and fulfillment in serving mankind. Together, we've served our country, our community, and our family with dignity and honor. We poured goodness into the lives of many, and for that, God has continued to show us tremendous favor and mercy. We've achieved beyond our dreams, and God has honored the prayers you prayed so faithfully. We visited nearly every one of the world's continents, traveled to nearly every state in the country. We've sailed many oceans and even came very close to touching the stars and the moon during the thousands of flights we've taken. We've kept company with world leaders, with royalty, celebrities, and the most humbled of God's profound creation. Our life experiences blow people's mind, especially when I tell them about you. It's only because of the courage you developed that I was able to confront and address life's bitter moments. Because of your courage, I found relief through my spirituality. And by the mercy of God, I found relief in mental health treatment. We've attained godly peace, little boy, and I am guarding it with every power I possess. I learned our healing was in my vulnerability. And guess what? I'm a dad. God granted me, because of your compassion, the gift of 2 daughters. Their names are Brittany and Ashley, and I love them with all my being. You will be very proud that I managed to protect and shield them from all the kinds of pain you experience. They remind me so much of you. They have your eyes, your skin color, your curiosity, and your brains too, laugh out loud. They are you reincarnated. I honor you with all my heart from the top of my heart, because that's where the good blood flows. I love you, and I am forever indebted to you for providing a strong and unwavering foundation of strength, humility, gratitude, courage, and power. Well, it's nearing time for me to go, but I want you to know you set me up. You set me up for a lifetime of joy, elation, and thanksgiving. God is doing a greater work in me. I know you don't like to be singled out. This time, though, my friend, you deserve it. I'll carry you in my heart all my days. I wish you continued joy, love, and peace. My vision for you is to continue allowing God to order your steps and guide your spirit. You still have lots of impact to make. So get off my line and get to it. Love always, your older self.
I thank you for that. For those of you listening, let me add a little takeaway with your spiritual doggy bag for this week. And I want to add a question. What motivates you? What story are you writing? Are you in touch with your talents, your gifts, your dreams, and your passion? Do you understand that you are worthy, that you have everything you need inside of you to be who you were created to be? Your calling in life is to fully express who you already are. The world will never see another human being like you. There is no one on the face of the planet that has what you have. Your uniqueness in every respect is your gift. Take good care. Bye now.